Let's take a look at Jesse Marsch here, guys, because there was a lot of love when he first came on board, and why not? The results ended up showing as well. But when it comes to the summer that was for the Canadian men's national team, obviously disappointing results in Nations League and the Gold Cup. Then for Jesse Marsch, Bayern Munich obviously was critical of how he handled Alphonso Davies with that injury in a third place match against the United States in Nations League. Marsch received some criticism after as well, speaking out with CONCACAF Champions Cup and Vancouver Whitecaps being poisoned. There's just a lot going on here. Guys, at the end of the day, the results are what mattered, and a lot of fans disappointed with how the Gold Cup ended. So would you say that the honeymoon period is over here for Jesse Marsch, and just how much pressure is on him, Gareth, when it comes to the performances against Romania and Wales?
I don't think the honeymoon's over. If you're doing one of those political type polls and you ask Canadians how they felt about Jesse Marsch, I think that it would resoundingly be positive. But the fact is that this last, 8 to 12 months hasn't been great for Jesse Marsch, really coming out of Copa America. It's just been okay. It's been chaotic. And there's been a lot of things that have surfaced that should raise some eyebrows. So perhaps the way that I'm approaching things is that some criticism right now or questions being asked about the manager is absolutely justified. But that's more for people like us who are in the weeds on a day-to-day basis, because what the expectation is going to be next summer by Canadians is that this very young emerging team that's seemingly very likable under Jesse Marsch is going to be able to perform. And I think that what's popped up over those recent months is some questions whether that's the case or whether things are being overstated about how good this team could be. So I think that Jesse has a big responsibility when it comes to this. He's in front of the microphone, the camera, more than anyone else involved in this program. And if the results go sideways, then he's the one that has to answer for it. I thought the Guatemala game and the way that it was managed was nowhere near good enough. The way the game ended with 4 strikers on the field and you have 10 men, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And that came off of really the Nations League, where Canada failed and were completely outplayed by Mexico and their new manager at that time. And then there was the shenanigans of being sent off from a game completely unnecessarily so. And a lot of this has been self-inflicted. So I think what Marsch needs to do is just get back to work, put his head down, manage this team, bring out the best of them. And then once the players start performing again to the best of their ability and this team starts coming away with results, then I think that overall those good feelings will return. But I think most Canadians, and look, like us in the soccer community are, within touching distance of this, but most Canadians just see this guy in front of the camera who's very likable, who's saying most of the right things. And I think they're completely on board about where this project is going. So there's a little bit of a dichotomy there. But if the results don't follow in these 3 upcoming windows and the team kind of wavers and there's more questions rather than answers, then I think some of that sentiment starts to change.
Yeah, look, I think to be fair to Jesse Marsch, there has been indications that he has learned from this summer and the past few months. I think he has kind of taken responsibility for the performances, particularly the performance against Guatemala. He's accepted that there's going to be some criticism there and that's to be expected. It was interesting in his press conference before this match that he was asked again about the US political situation and just said he did not want to get back into that. Mm-hmm. So I think there's, maybe been another lesson there about what the team needs right now, as much as, you may want to, express your views at times on these things. So hopefully they've taken some good steps forward in that regard. I don't think there's any pressure on obviously his job. Like, he's one of the more secure managers in international football, to be honest. He's going to be coaching
maybe
Canada.
the most. Maybe the most, Ollie. Like there's 0% chance he loses his job between now and the World Cup, no matter what the results are.
Of course.
0%.
Well, unless there is complete catastrophe over the next few games, which isn't going to happen, because I think we still like or something like that. But you still have to look at his record and say, this is a manager who's lost 4 games in 21 now for Canada, and 2 of them were against the world champions. So that kind of disaster, I just don't think is really conceivable is going to happen. So I don't think the pressure is on his job. I think the pressure is more internal, to be honest, because as Wheels talked about, I don't think it's really going to come massively from the outside. I think he's still pretty popular with the supporters. I think it's more about demonstrating to the players that he's the manager who can take this team to the next level. And that was a little bit I felt at the end for John Herdman, where there started to be, a little bit of doubt on maybe on the player side, a little bit of the relationship not being as strong as it had been in the past after what happened at the World Cup, after losing the Nations League final. And I think these players, as much as it's on them, obviously, to demonstrate that and to take their performances to another level and to show that maybe they can handle some of the moments of big games better, it's also on the coach to equip them in the right way, to lead them in the right way, and to set them up for success. And I think that's something that Jesse Marsch is going to need to demonstrate, that he made a really good start on at the Copa America, that maybe has slipped a bit this year, that now you just want to show again over these next few games as much as you can, obviously playing friendlies as opposed to competitive matches. So the pressure, I would think, is more there. You've got some top class players in this team. You've got to show them that you're the one who can really achieve what they want to achieve at that World Cup next summer.
Yeah, and sentiment will turn, Andy. Like if they lose both these games, like more people will kind of peek up to the fact that, wow, what's going on here, and more questions will be answered. I think things are going to be a little bit easier with him until Alphonso Davies returns to the setup, because that issue seems very unresolved. Just what that relationship is like. And until that, like once that happens, and especially the countdown will really be on for the World Cup. Once Alphonso returns, there's going to be a lot of questions. Like Alphonso is the biggest star in the team, and what's that relationship between manager and player? That's when I think that's when Jesse will actually kind of feel the most pressure in order to handle that situation the right way. And I think it needs to be managed appropriately in order for this not to be any kind of issue or distraction in the build-up to the World Cup.
Well, if we look at these two games, and we're talking about perception of Jesse Marsch, maybe even more so with the general public, right away you can already see the backline decimated, don't have, the full fledge of players up front. You can already see that conversation happening. And not that I want to say excuses. There are excuses and there are reasons. Not that I'm trying to say that they'll play poorly against these two teams, but I want to go back to what you said, Ollie, maybe more internally, because there's no doubt Jesse Marsch isn't going anywhere. He's going to be the head coach during the World Cup. That's that. I will bet my house on that. That I will bet on, Wheels. But internally, what would it mean for Jesse Marsch if they play poorly? So it's one thing to lose, but if you play poorly, what kind of conversations do you think start to happen?
Yeah, I mean, there's anxiety in the group. There's a loss of momentum, obviously, that maybe they had at previous points. And I'm sure at that point there would be some criticism from the outside as well. I'm not saying there'll be none of that. I just don't think it will ever be significant enough to have a meaningful impact on his job security. I'll be honest, though, I just don't think it's going to happen. I think this team has generally played pretty consistently under Jesse Marsch. There was a real kind of disappointing performance for me in terms of the Mexico game in March. And then there was a Guatemala game where they just had a nightmare second half and, got a lot wrong, unfortunately, in terms of how to handle that situation. But it was a unique situation playing with 10 men, a goal up, that clearly they need to learn the lessons from. But overall, particularly, to be honest, when they've played against better teams, I think the performance level has been pretty good. I don't think it's been perfect. I think there's still steps they need to take to really be ready for those games next summer when it matters. But generally speaking, they this isn't a team that has kind of made a regular habit of embarrassing themselves in these types of games. So I just don't anticipate that happening. Of course, if they played poorly and lost both, then you're having a different conversation.
Yeah, well, one of the common elements of these recent games is no Moise Bombito. I mean, that's a big issue. I think that the players, there's a real opportunity for them to try to make Jesse's life easier. There needs to be some sort of clarity about role definition and who's playing in what position. I understand that, Johnston, Davies, Bombito, Liam Miller will be back in the mix, Jebison, Larin, all out. But it's time that certain players start staking their claim. Look at the goalkeeping position. Marsch has said that it's going to be one game for Sinclair and one game for Crepeau, who's maybe the second best goalkeeper for his club team right now. That's what you got right now. And then a young Hibbert who's come into camp, and for whatever reason, he's not playing. So he's given the benefit of the doubt to these two players. Perhaps this plays into Marsch saying that these 3 windows. They're kind of combining it to one, and I'm sure that Hibbert will get a game at some point, but that position needs to be resolved. What about your depth at center back? Are you really in a position where Defugerol is going to play over a Waterman or someone else going to actually emerge there to provide some security? Seager, Larea, players that can play across the field. Is there going to be some more definition for them just in case these injuries, pop up or persist? The central midfield mix, who's the preferred pairing in the middle? The left side, how do you resolve that issue? And who's playing up top with Jonathan David? There's still a lot of questions to be asked here. This team does not pick itself. And now Jesse's going to be looking to the players for some sort of response. So although we can critique the manager and that's part of the job, the players will be under the microscope as well, because they're the ones that need to go in and perform and make Jesse's job that much easier or that much more difficult.
So I'll say this about the injuries. It's exciting, to your point there. It is exciting to see these players probably get, whether it's a starting role, whether it's just more playing time. So this is the window when you have players missing. To your point, we've been saying this all along. The opportunity is there, and this can actually be pretty exciting to see which young players can really stand out to Jesse Marsch.